sit down.
Oh, sorry.
And you have to say go or I get in trouble.
That's it.
There are a lot of rules involved in filming. 1, don't slam things. 2, you don't go till it says go.
Okay, go.
Happy New Year! We're headed into 2025, and that is going to be our year. I am saying it now, 2025 is our year. Your year, my year, it's the year. We're doing it.
What is it we're doing?
It. All of it, whatever it happens to be for you. For me, it happens to be a cake. Segue into today's show. So what you guys don't know is New Year's Eve is my little brother's birthday. He is my best friend. He is my wonderful partner. That sounded weird. He is my best friend. He's my partner in crime. We text and send memes daily, all day long. I cannot imagine my life without him. We've been stuck at the hip since he was born. Why are you talking over me?
Sorry. He can be your wonderful partner.
So what we're gonna make today is a New Year's Eve cake with a very beautiful homage to my little brother, Evan. A decadent, gorgeous chocolate cake, strawberry filling, champagne flavored Swiss buttercream. It's gonna look impressive, it's gonna be impressive, and you're gonna make it. 2 things I want you to do is 1, preheat your oven to 325. The second thing you're gonna do is put some water on to boil because we are gonna need hot coffee. This is an old-fashioned cake. I'm gonna use a mixer. Just had a thought, no idea if he's plugged in.
He is. Give him a try.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, production.
Thanks, production. So I am using a mixer, but you don't have to use a mixer for this recipe. The beauty of this recipe is that you can do it all by hand. So what we're gonna do is you are gonna take 3 ounces of chocolate. This is chocolate chips, whatever chocolate you like. You can use high end, low end, but just make sure that it's chocolate. We are also gonna do 2 teaspoons of instant coffee, and that's where you're going to put your boiling water. You're going to fill it to 1.5 cups, and that will make 1.5 cups of coffee. What? Also, funny story, I don't know why, but my papa would always put a bowl, and then he would put his coffee cup in the bowl, and then he would do instant coffee, and then he would fill it until it overflowed into the bowl, and then drink the coffee out of the cup, and then drink the coffee out of the bowl, and I don't know why.
Old Southern men who watch the show, please write in.
Please write in and tell me, because that is one thing I have no idea about. To be fair, there's a lot of things I don't have an idea about. So you've got 2 teaspoons of coffee. We're adding 1.5 cups of boiling water to our coffee to make coffee. Once you've got your coffee, it doesn't have to seep for any amount of time. You want to immediately add your chocolate chips so that this whole mixture can cool down and melt the chocolate and just chill out. 3 ounces of chocolate right in. Set it aside. That was step 1. Killing it. Step 2. We are going to sift some dry ingredients. I like to do it on parchment. However, we will be sifting a large amount of dry ingredients, so I'm gonna sift it right into the bowl this time. So a little change up.
Keeping you on your toes.
Keeping you on your toes. Get a sifter. Get a sifter, get a large bowl, vintage optional. And we are going to put into this sifter 3 cups of granulated sugar. And as your sifter fills up, feel free to go ahead and do a little sifting. You're gonna put 3.5, nope. You're gonna put 3 cups, nope, 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 1.5 cups of cocoa, just regular old buy it at the store cocoa. That's gonna give us a chocolate flavor, but it's also going to amplify the flavor with the coffee and the chocolate, which we'll get to later. I'm a little full, so I'm gonna sift a little. Anytime I'm working with cocoa, I prefer to sift it. It does tend to clump easily. We are going to add, not that. We are going to add 2 teaspoons of baking soda. It sounds like a lot of baking soda, but we're going to add buttermilk later. Buttermilk reacts with baking soda, and that's a leavener, and that's gonna raise it up. You put acid with it. Anybody that made a volcano in elementary school, you know how this works. We're also gonna do 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking powder, 1 1/4 teaspoon of salt, And I'm just gonna finish sifting this. If you've seen my red velvet cake episode, this is a very similar process of making different mixtures that we're going to mix together to make a cake. I really like this method. I think it works well. I think it gives a nice airy cake. So that's how I prefer to do it. I've got to get my hands dirty, so you know I'm gonna grab a glove. I wear these big giant gold rings because we're making a gold cake, and it's like really awkward on my hands with the glove. So just gonna finish sieving this through. Make sure we don't have any lumps, no clumps, no mumps or dumps, no plumps.
No blumps.
I love a good blump. Don't wear rings while you're baking. There's not even a bag in that trash. So you've made your dry mixture, you have made your coffee mixture. The next thing we're gonna do is make the wet ingredients. You are gonna take 3/4 of a cup of oil, neutral oil. I use olive oil. Nope, I don't. That's a lie. Bold-faced lie. I use vegetable oil. A lot of Southern cakes tend to use oil, especially if you're trying to keep a cake moist and you want it to be moist for a really long time, like oil's the way to go. So 3/4 of a cup of oil. 3/4 of a cup of oil.
It's okay for your Southern to show.
I saw a meme that was like, oh, you think you've lost your Southern accent? Say oil. We're gonna add 1.5 cups of my favorite ingredient, buttermilk.
Sounds delicious.
Just to explain what happened just now, whenever you're making a cake or a baked good, what you strive for is everything to be the same temperature. So I had the buttermilk out overnight, and yes, it does get that chunky. Set it out overnight, it's gonna be just fine, I promise you. Last to our wet mixture, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, which is actually kind of low for me. Like I usually do like a tablespoon or 2. That is our wet ingredients. I'm gonna take my little spatula. You don't have to mix it completely together. We just kind of want to get it going. It'll thin out the buttermilk a little bit and it'll thicken up the oil a little. Oil. The last mixture is going to be eggs. 3 eggs. I usually use large, but I've used extra large and it's been just fine. We're gonna pop those into Steely Dan. We don't need this very high. We're just gonna go to probably a 3 or 4. We're not trying to whip air into it. We're just trying to whip it till it is lemony and thickened. You see how it just looks like lemony color, and when you do this, it's thickened. That's what you're looking for. Our coffee is still cooling down. We don't want it to be boiling lava hot. So we're gonna leave it to cool a little bit longer just while we prep our pans. I'm gonna kind of go through this pretty fast. Please check out the Red Velvet episode in season 1, where I kind of break this down pretty slowly. And I'll show you a few tips and tricks here while I'm doing it. Tips and tricks. I wanna make a big cake. So I'm doing 10-inch rounds. If you wanna do 8-inch rounds, it's fine. Just keep an eye on the time. The time's not gonna be correct. It's gonna take a little bit longer because it's thicker. This makes 8-inch rounds. I've made this into cupcakes. It does 10-inch rounds. This recipe works for everything, but I want a big 10-inch cake because it's my brother's birthday. Oh, we're getting ready to eat so much cake. So what I just pulled from my warm place is what I call goop. I go over that in the Red Velvet episode. It's half butter, half Crisco. Then you're just going to brush it on the bottom of the pan. I already have my parchment set up. This is just a sheet of parchment that I folded a bunch of times. And again, all of this is on the Red Velvet episode as well, so please check it out. I just cut this to match. Cut this to match. Save these. You cut them off. You don't need them, but save them. We'll use them for decorating. Now we're gonna pop these. Well, first we're gonna turn them magically into a circle. Did that read?
Totally.
Yes. Magic to do. So we put down the goop. We put in the round of parchment. We stuck the parchment to the goop, and I'm gonna do that to the next one. Sticking the parchment to the goop. So we've got that in. We're just gonna goop it up. This just helps your cake not stick to the pan. I prefer these type of pans over springform, but cakes can get stuck in them a little bit easier than a springform pan. So this goop that we are adding right now in a thin layer is going to help that cake release when we need it to. So we got our goop on, thin layer. Gonna add a little bit of flour. We're not measuring this flour. We are just trying to coat the pan. So I am just flouring over the goop. It's just one extra layer. Now we're gonna just, and see, that's it. Just that extra little bit of insurance that it'll pop out. Because the worst thing in the world is when you're on a time crunch and the cake doesn't come out and then you're like, well, now what do I do? So this just double insurance, make sure everything's cool. So as you have noticed, I put a piece of parchment down. That's just so that we can easily transfer some more flour over here and we don't lose any flour. Here's a tip that I do. I keep a tiny airtight container full of flour, and the only thing I use it for is lining cake pans so that I'm not putting, any goop that it might pick up, I'm not putting that back into my flour that I'm making cakes out of. And because I keep it in that airtight, I can reuse it. So if you make a lot of cakes, that's just one little trick that I find very, very handy. And if you don't make a lot of cakes, it's still handy. Oh no. All right, and see, we just take our parchment, we put it back in our airtight container, ready for next time. So our pans are ready. We've got our eggs lemony and thickened. We have got our buttermilk ready to go. We're gonna just do a real quick whisk, make sure that is combined again. And we're just gonna add that right to the egg mixture. They're the same temperature, so we don't have to worry too much about it. We're just trying to mix it in. The next thing we're gonna do is check our chocolate and coffee. As you can see, it is no longer steaming. I can put my hand on it, I can put my hands around it. It's warm because it was boiling, but it's not hot. So let's do a whisk to get that chocolate up in there. Now I am gonna add this just a little bit slower because it is warm, but you don't have to worry that much about it. This isn't a situation where we're having to temper eggs for pudding, but I'm just gonna add it slowly for my own peace of mind. So as you add the warm mixture and it's mixing in, it's slowly bringing up the temperature of the eggs. A lot of old-fashioned cake recipes call for hot water. That just helps everything kind of emulsify a little bit. The reason that I'm using coffee is anytime you're using chocolate, coffee is your best friend. Even if I'm just making like a brownie or something, I put a little bit of coffee in it because it really amplifies that chocolate flavor. You don't always know it's there, but it helps enhance the flavor. Same with vanilla, same with salt. If I'm doing anything chocolate, you can bet that I've put coffee, salt, and vanilla in it. All right, so we have got the coffee mixture in. It's cooled off. Everything's room temperature. Now the last thing we're gonna do to make our cakes is add our sifted flour mixture. This is gonna get messy because normally I'm not on this side of the mixer, so this might go everywhere. We'll see. So I've got my spatula. I'm gonna move Steely right here, and I'm just gonna add that flour mixture we did earlier. So we don't really have to be that careful of how we're adding it, how much we're adding at a time. The only thing that I'm being careful of is not having it fly back in my face. I still have the whisk attachment on. Don't be afraid. You're not gonna make so much gluten that it's bread-like, I promise you. I got cocoa, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. So I'm just cranking that up. It's still 1 speed on your mixer. Once it's mostly combined, you're gonna be able to see that there's really no streaks. That's when we're gonna pull it. Yeah, oh, my hands. Oh God. I'll be right back. Okay, so it's, I would say 98% mixed in. I'm just gonna go in with my spatula, make sure that there are no like flour or cocoa streaks. If you are mixing this by hand instead of a mixer, it might look a little lumpy to you. It's not a problem. Just make sure you don't have a giant lump of cocoa or flour, but we did sift it, so that should prevent that. So you see how watery this batter is? That's what it's supposed to look like. Relax, you got me. Grab our prepared pans. I'ma eyeball it, but feel free if you want to weigh it to get it exactly perfectly the same size. I have done that, but we're just going to kind of eyeball it today. Trust in my eyeballing skills. You are making a cake for someone you love. For your friends coming over on New Year's, for your family coming over on New Year's, for a friend's birthday. If it's not exactly perfect, it's going to taste good, I promise. Baking should be fun. You should enjoy it. So don't stress about this. When I bake cakes, I like to put them on sheet pans. Very, very rarely do they boil over because this is a lot, you know, we have a lot of room for this to rise, but it's easier to get them in and out of the oven if you have a sheet pan. So I'm just gonna pop these on the sheet pan. You've preheated your oven to 325, haven't you? I hope so. I think I said that.
You did.
Yes! Nailed it. And we are gonna put these in the oven. This is gonna bake for approximately, in my oven it's about 45 minutes, but what you're looking for is to touch it in the middle and it's solid. Feel free to do the toothpick test. That's more important than how long they're in the oven. But 325 for at least 45 minutes. And I'll see you right back here. It is warm to the touch, and I'm just gonna show you really quickly what I do. So we have worked hard to make sure that it does not stick. So once we invert this, it's gonna pop right out. I have got a little rack here. I've got a piece of parchment. You're gonna put it on top of the pan, and you're just gonna flip them. Ta-da! That's so satisfying. Take off your parchment, look at that cake. And you know I like to give little tips. This is my little tip today. Let it cool to room temperature so that when you're touching it, you're not feeling any heat. Then you're gonna go ahead and just wrap it up in plastic wrap, pop it in the fridge. That's gonna make it easier to ice. It's gonna age and ferment a little bit of the flavor. It's gonna let everything settle where it needs to settle. Just make sure that it's airtight and that you've done it right after it's got to room temperature. So that's exactly what I did. I'm gonna set this aside, bring out my wrapped cake, and then I'm going to teach you how to make Swiss meringue icing. Sounds scary. It's just a little more technical than what you're used to, but we're gonna make it and you're gonna love it. Y'all, we make the Swiss meringue and we ice the cake. Apologies to the French for season 1 and apologies to the Swiss for season 2. Well, it was nice meeting you.
Perfect.
So as you can see, I put a little cake round underneath each layer, wrapped it as tight as I could in plastic wrap, put it in the fridge overnight. Firms it up, keeps it cool, makes it easier to put icing on. So we're gonna set that aside for now, and I'm gonna show you Swiss meringue icing. So I grew up in the South. I grew up with frosting. I did not grow up with icing. I grew up with frosted. Frosting tends to be like an American buttercream base, so it's mostly butter and powdered sugar. Icing can be more sophisticated. The one that I'm gonna show you today actually has a meringue in it, which meringues can sound daunting, but it's just a little bit of technical work that is very easily done. I'm gonna show you how, of course. We're gonna start with egg whites. It doesn't hurt anything to have them pre-pasteurized. It's really a safety measure. You don't have to do it, but it's also very easy because then I don't have egg yolks just laying around the house. You are going to need, for this recipe, 1 1/3 cup, which is about 340 grams. So when you look at the bottom, it'll tell you how many grams of egg whites are in your carton. In your carton. It's usually one of the small cartons, it's less than that. So we're gonna grab our mixing bowl, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna put the ingredients in here and make a double boiler. So we're gonna pop those in. You're gonna add to that 3 1/3 cup of sugar. We are also gonna do 1 1/2 teaspoons of kosher salt. If you are using table salt, use half of that, because kosher salt is not as salty as table salt. Lastly, we are going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar. Anytime I'm whipping up egg whites and I want to make them like nice and frothy or nice and big, get the air incorporated, I always add a little cream of tartar because that helps the structure of the egg hold. It sounds like you can skip it, but it does make a big difference. So I'm gonna set that aside, grab my trusty whisk. I'm just gonna do an initial whisk together, get everything incorporated, and that's good. The other thing you're gonna need, don't be afraid, is a thermometer. Get yourself a thermometer. I got this one online on a very well-known store named after a rainforest, delivered in 24 hours. Whatever you want, but we need to keep an eye on this temperature. I am going to have you join me over at my stove, Iris. Camera 2. We're going to camera 2. We're going to camera 2, let's go! Hi, camera 2! So we've got our egg white mixture. Pop this right on top. It's gonna probably take 10 minutes-ish to get this to the temperature that we want. I like to keep it moving. Sometimes I use a whisk, sometimes I use a spatula, as long as it's moving around. So our goal temperature is 185. It's gonna pasteurize your egg whites, make everything safe, melt the sugar, and let everything combine, and get it to a temperature that it can fluff up like a marshmallow. I don't have anything to say, I'm just stirring. Ooh, she heating up fast today. So this has reached 185 just now. I've only been stirring it with a spatula. I have not used the whisk, but do you see how white and frothy that is? And it's super hot, very, very hot. So now I'm gonna grab my oven mitts and move this back over to the mixer. I'm not gonna do the thing again, we're just gonna go back to camera one. We immediately got it off the heat. You can still see all the steam rising, and put it on our mixer with the whisk attachment, and we are gonna crank this up to, let's start at 6. What we're doing is twofold. We want to create a lot of air in there to get it nice and fluffy, but we also want it to cool down so we can add our butter. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that up. See all that steam? It usually takes 10 minutes almost exactly. I've made this, I don't even know how many dozens of times, and I do it 10 minutes and it's perfect every time. So feel free to use the thermometer, take it to 90 degrees, but I'm just gonna whip it up for about 10 minutes. Once it's starting to thicken up, you can go ahead and crank it a little bit more every time, and it's just gonna get thicker. In the meantime, don't freak out. You're gonna need 10 sticks of butter. And I can't tell you how much pleasure I get out of saying 10 sticks of butter, because butter is everything. You're gonna cut it into 1 tablespoon pieces about.
No!
It's beautiful. So you want the butter to be room temperature. If you press it, it's gonna indent. That's what you want it. So this cake is an homage to my little brother's Big Bird cake. So it's going to be a yellow gold. You can use it for birthdays, you can use it for New Year's Eve. You can do any color you want and use it any time of the year you want. I'm not gonna judge you. I'm not going to police this. I'm not gonna come to your house and be like, what color is that? No, I'm not. You see how fluffy and thick it is now? That's what you're looking for. This is the nice marshmallowy texture. All right, that's 10 minutes. Let's check her out. We're golden, Pony Boy.
She's well read, folks.
S.E. Hinton is from Tulsa. The Outsiders was filmed in Tulsa. That's where I went to high school. Technically Bixby, but whatever. So we've got our 10 sticks of butter. We have our meringue, which you just made a Swiss meringue, by the way. Congratulations. I want you to see how beautiful and glossy this is. Look at that. Stunning. Now we are going to add the butter. You're gonna turn it on to, let's say 4. 1 tablespoon at a time. Once you see that magically disappear, we're gonna add another one. And we're just gonna keep doing that. Basically, you're wanting the butter to melt and mix into that warm mixture. And slowly, that's also gonna make this cooler, which is gonna give it stability. The recipe that I'm giving you for this icing is a double recipe. So you can have this recipe easily and ice a cake. I'm making extra because I want some frills, and Swiss buttercream freezes beautifully. Once we've got it to the icing stage, we are going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And this is what makes this super special. This is a 1/4 teaspoon of sparkling wine essence. You can buy that online. And I'm just gonna shove this down again. And now we're just gonna get the icing off the whisk. I found this is the easiest way to get the icing off. The whisk.